Madison Square Garden, New York, September 2001. The air inside the arena seemed to vibrate with its own electric current, a living thing composed of anticipation and devotion that pulsed through the bodies of 20,000 souls pressed together in near-religious communion. This wasn't just another concert on another tour. This was the second night of Michael Jackson's 30th anniversary celebration, a rare convergence of past and present meant to honor 3 decades of musical revolution. The crowd's murmurs created a sonic tapestry of languages and accents. Japanese tourists beside Bronx teenagers, European journalists alongside Midwest families who had spent their savings to witness history. Celebrity faces dotted the front rows. Liza Minnelli chatting animatedly with Elizabeth Taylor. Macaulay Culkin slouched casually beside a perfectly postured Whitney Houston. As the house lights dimmed for the final time, a preternatural hush fell over the massive space. 20,000 bodies stilled. 20,000 breaths held. In that perfect moment of anticipation, time itself seemed suspended between heartbeats. The silence before revelation. Behind a massive stage, in a private dressing room secured by 3 layers of security, Michael Jackson stood perfectly still before a full-length mirror. At 43, his slender frame was draped in a custom-designed, crystal-encrusted military jacket that caught and fractured light with each subtle movement, transforming him into a living constellation. His face, subject of endless speculation and cruel commentary, revealed nothing of his thoughts, a skill perfected through decades under humanity's most unforgiving microscope. Only his eyes, unusually expressive in contrast to his carefully composed features, betrayed the storm of emotions beneath the surface. Tonight will be different from every performance that had come before it. Not because of the set list or the special guests already announced. Those elements had been meticulously planned, rehearsed, perfected with the attention to detail that had defined Michael's career. No, tonight would be different because of information that had reached him just 30 minutes earlier, whispered urgently by his manager between costume changes. Prince was in the building. The history between Michael Jackson and Prince stretched back 2 decades, a complex tapestry of admiration, competition, and carefully maintained distance. Both had revolutionized music in the 1980s. Both had shattered racial barriers in entertainment. Both had created personas larger than life while fiercely protecting the private individuals behind those creations. The media had manufactured a rivalry that made for good headlines and magazine covers, but the truth was more nuanced. They were neither friends nor enemies, but something more complex. Artistic contemporaries whose parallel paths occasionally intersected, often with uncomfortable results. There had been awkward moments. The time Prince had declined to participate in We Are the World, the infamous incident when Prince had allegedly attempted to ram Michael with his car outside a studio. But there had also been near misses at reconciliation, private acknowledgments of respect conveyed through intermediaries, moments when each had defended the other against criticism while maintaining public distance. What the audience didn't know, what even most of the performers and organizers didn't realize, was that Prince had not been invited to tonight's celebration. His presence in the building was unexpected, unplanned, and potentially explosive given the carefully orchestrated nature of the event. Michael's team had been thrown into quiet panic, security protocols activated, seating arrangements hurriedly adjusted to ensure adequate distance between the 2 icons. Michael himself had received the news with characteristic inscrutability, his expression revealing nothing as his manager delivered the update. But those who knew him best noted the slight tightening around his eyes, the barely perceptible shift in his breathing pattern. After 2 decades in the spotlight, after countless performances before presidents and royalty, very little could disrupt Michael Jackson's pre-show composure. Prince's unexpected presence had done exactly that. A soft knock at the door. 5 minutes, Michael. The voice of his longtime stage manager carried no hint of the backstage tension. The whispered contingency plans, the nervous glances exchanged among staff who understood the volatile potential of the situation. Michael adjusted the single white glove that had become both signature and shield, more symbol than practical accessory. "I'm ready," he said, and meant it in ways that extended far beyond this evening's performance. Whatever happened tonight, whether Prince's presence remained a background fact or evolved into something more direct, he would meet it with the professionalism and artistic integrity that had guided his career through its highest peaks and deepest valleys. When Michael Jackson finally appeared on the Madison Square Garden stage, the response was seismic, a wall of sound that seemed to physically press against him, a tangible force composed of tens of thousands of voices releasing months, years, sometimes decades of anticipation in a single explosive moment. He stood motionless in the spotlight, absorbing it, allowing it to wash over and through him. This moment, the first appearance, the initial connection with an audience, had always been among his favorites, a rare instance where the exchange of energy between performer and witness was its most pure, uncomplicated by expectation or judgment. Tonight, that moment stretched longer than usual, Michael remaining still as the ovation continued, showing no sign of diminishing. He closed his eyes briefly, committing the sound to memory, knowing that what unfolded from this point forward might follow paths no one had anticipated. The first hour of the performance unfolded with the precision and spectacle that had become his hallmark. Each song was a self-contained theatrical experience, smooth criminal, with its gravity-defying lean that still defied logical explanation, black or white, with its message of unity that felt particularly poignant in the aftermath of New York's recent tragedy. Beat It, with its stylized confrontation transformed into dance. The audience responded with increasing fervor to each familiar hit, each iconic move. But those with keen observational skills, those who had studied Michael's performances with devotion, might have noticed subtle differences. Between songs, his usual scanning of the audience seemed more deliberate, more focused, as if searching for a specific face among the thousands. During instrumental breaks, his whispered instructions to band members and dancers contained an urgency not typically present in his meticulously rehearsed shows. Midway through the concert, as Michael prepared for Billie Jean, the song that had transformed him from star to legend, something shifted in the atmosphere. A ripple moved through a section of the audience near stage right, a subtle disturbance in the otherwise seamless attention directed toward the stage. Michael, ever attuned to the slightest changes in audience energy, noticed immediately. His eyes, still focused on delivering each perfect note, nonetheless scanned the crowd, seeking the source of the disruption. And then he saw him, Prince, seated in a private box, dressed not in his signature purple, but in an understated black suit that seemed designed to minimize attention. Their eyes met across the distance, across years of history, both public and private, across all the words said and unsaid between them. For a split second, so brief that most in the audience missed it entirely, Michael's perfect performance faltered. A single note wavered. His fingers hesitated on their path to the iconic fedora tilt that preceded the song's central dance sequence. What happened next would be recounted differently by everyone who witnessed it. Some would say Michael simply stopped singing, the music continuing without his voice. Others would claim the entire band fell silent on his signal. The truth, as captured in the footage that would later be analyzed frame by frame, was both simpler and more complex. Michael raised his hand in the universal gesture for stop, and within 4 seconds, the music faded to silence. 20,000 people held their breath, confusion mingling with anticipation. This was not part of the show as they knew it, not part of the carefully choreographed performance they had expected. Michael stood center stage, the spotlight creating a perfect circle of illumination around his slender figure. For what felt like an eternity, but was in fact only 17 seconds, he stood in complete silence, looking directly at the box where Prince sat equally still, their mutual gaze creating an invisible bridge across the arena. When Michael finally spoke, his voice carried that characteristic softness that required absolute silence to be heard. "They say music is about competition," he said, the words falling into the hushed arena like stones into still water. "About who's on top, who's the best, who's the king." The audience remained perfectly quiet, collectively holding their breath, sensing they were witnessing something unscripted, something raw and real in a context usually defined by meticulous planning. But that's not what I've found to be true, Michael continued. Music, at its core, is about harmony, about different notes coming together to create something more beautiful than any could achieve alone. As he spoke, a second spotlight activated, illuminating Prince in his private box. The audience gasped, then erupted in a new wave of excitement as they realized what was happening, who was being acknowledged. Prince, initially caught off guard by the sudden illumination, recovered quickly, rising to his feet with characteristic grace. He offered a small bow toward the stage, a gesture containing acknowledgement, respect, perhaps even a hint of apology for the years of manufactured conflict. Michael returned the bow, then straightened with renewed purpose. "I'd like to invite someone to join me," he said, the invitation hanging in the air, electrifying in its unexpectedness. "Someone whose artistry I've admired, whose path has run parallel to mine through this strange journey we call fame. Prince, will you come down here?" If this story moves you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more untold stories from music history. Moments when the carefully constructed walls between artists briefly fell away, revealing the humanity that connects us all regardless of fame or fortune. These glimpses behind the public personas remind us why music matters beyond entertainment, how it creates bridges between experiences that might otherwise never connect. For a moment that seemed to stretch into infinity, nothing happened. The audience's murmuring grew louder, anticipation mixing with disbelief. Michael stood his ground, seemingly prepared to wait as long as necessary. Then movement. Prince navigating through the private box toward its exit, disappearing momentarily from public view. Security personnel visibly scrambled to create a path from the box to the stage, clearly unprepared for this spontaneous deviation from protocol. The band, consummate professionals to their core, exchanged glances of confusion but readied themselves for whatever might come next. Michael remained center stage, outwardly calm, though those who knew him best might have detected the subtle signs of tension in his posture, in the set of his shoulders beneath the crystalline jacket. 3 minutes passed, an eternity in performance time, in television time, in the collective attention span of 20,000 people. The murmurs grew louder, confusion mingling with excitement. And then, from stage left, a figure emerged. Prince, walking with that distinctive combination of feline grace and controlled power that had made his own performances legendary. He crossed the massive stage with unhurried confidence, his face revealing nothing of what must have been a complex emotional response to this unexpected public reconciliation. When he reached center stage, he and Michael stood facing each other, less than arm's length apart, two of music's most revolutionary artists meeting in an unplanned, unscripted moment before the largest audience either had addressed in years. The contrast between them was striking and compelling. Michael all sharp angles and sculpted precision, Prince fluid lines and contained energy. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, taking each other's measure as the crowd held its collective breath. Then Prince smiled, that enigmatic, knowing smile that suggested he was always one step ahead of everyone else in the room. "You always did know how to make an entrance," he said, his voice low but picked up by the microphone position between them. A ripple of laughter moved through the audience, tension dissolving in the unexpected humor of the moment. Michael's response was his own smile, genuine in a way his public expressions rarely were. "I learned from watching you," he replied, the simple acknowledgement of influence containing volumes of previously unspoken respect. What happened over the next 20 minutes would become legendary in music circles, analyzed and discussed for decades to come. Without rehearsal, without planning, Michael and Prince created a spontaneous collaboration that drew on their respective musical vocabularies while creating something entirely new. They began with Billie Jean, Prince adding improvised guitar lines that somehow enhanced rather than competed with the song's iconic bass line. They transitioned seamlessly into Prince's Kiss, Michael adapting his dance style to complement the funk-driven rhythm, finding points of convergence between his precision and Prince's looseness. The audience watched in stunned appreciation as two artists who had been positioned as rivals for decades revealed not competition, but complementarity, not discord, but unexpected harmony. Most remarkable was the visible transformation in both men as the impromptu jam session continued. Michael, so often contained and controlled, even at his most explosive performances, displayed a looser, more openly joyful presence. His legendary intensity remained, but alongside it emerged something rarer, a visible pleasure in the act of collaborative creation, in responding to another artist's impulses rather than directing every musical moment. Prince, whose public persona had often leaned toward the provocative, showed subtlety and sensitivity in his playing, at times deliberately pulling back to create space for Michael's vocals, at other times providing such a solid foundation that Michael could venture into his most experimental dance territories, secure in the knowledge that the music would support his exploration. Near the end of their unexpected duet, during a moment when the band dropped to a whisper and the two icons stood close together at center stage, exchanging quiet words inaudible to the audience, something extraordinary happened. Michael removed his signature glove, the rhinestone-covered accessory that had been part of his performance identity for nearly 2 decades, and offered it to Prince. The gesture, captured on the arena's massive screens, struck the audience with the force of symbol made literal. Prince accepted it with a nod that somehow contained decades of complicated history. He slipped it onto his own hand, held it up to catch the light, then removed from his wrist a purple scarf that had been barely visible beneath his jacket sleeve. This he offered to Michael, who wrapped it around his own wrist with careful deliberation. The exchange, wordless but heavy with meaning, created an almost electric reaction in the audience. Not just applause, but a sound that contained surprise, joy, and the particular wonder that accompanies the witnessing of something genuine in a context often defined by artifice. As their collaboration drew to its natural conclusion, the two men stood center stage facing the audience, Prince with Michael's glove catching light with each movement, Michael with Prince's purple scarf visible against his crystalline costume. "Music is bigger than any one of us," Michael said, addressing the audience, but clearly speaking to something beyond the moment, beyond the arena. "It's bigger than rivalry, bigger than ego, bigger than all the narratives that get created around it." Prince nodded in agreement, then stepped to the microphone. "Sometimes it takes a while to remember that," he added, the simple statement containing acknowledgement of the years of distance, of misunderstanding. But better late than never. The audience erupted again, understanding they were witnessing not just a musical collaboration, but a human reconciliation, a public healing of wounds most had only glimpsed through media speculation and industry gossip. The remainder of the concert took on a dreamlike quality for everyone present. Prince exited to thunderous applause, leaving Michael to complete his planned set. But something had shifted in the atmosphere. The energy transformed from mere entertainment to something approaching communion. When Michael performed Man in the Mirror, his anthem about personal transformation as the foundation for broader change, the lyrics seemed to comment directly on what had just transpired, on the choice to set aside pride and history in favor of connection and respect. The audience responded in kind, their energy reflecting the emotional openness that had been modeled on stage. Backstage, after the final encore, after the lights had come up and the crowd began the slow process of dispersing, Michael and Prince met again away from cameras and microphones. What transpired in that private conversation would never be fully revealed, though both would reference it in later years as a turning point, a moment of recognition that transcended the public gesture. Michael's longtime personal assistant, present for this private epilogue, would later describe it with careful respect for both men's privacy. They talked like two people who had known each other forever but had been kept apart by circumstances beyond their control. Not just friendly, but familiar, like they'd found a piece of themselves they'd forgotten was missing. In the days that followed, the music press exploded with accounts of the unexpected collaboration. Rolling Stone called it the reconciliation no one saw coming and everyone needed. MTV played the footage on hourly rotation. Industry analysts dissected every moment, every gesture, every note exchange between the two icons. But beyond the commercial impact, beyond the publicity, something more significant had occurred. A narrative had been disrupted. The expected story of artistic rivalry and ego-driven competition had given way to one of mutual respect and unexpected harmony. For the audiences who witnessed it, either in person or through subsequent broadcasts, the moment took on an almost mythical quality as years passed. I was there when Michael and Prince made peace. They would say, though peace was an oversimplification of what had transpired. The truth was both simpler and more complex. They had been there when two singular artists, each following his own distinct vision, had found a moment of convergence. A moment when the paths they walked alone briefly ran parallel, close enough to reach across and touch. What most people didn't know, what wouldn't emerge until years later in rare interviews with band members and production staff, was how completely unplanned the entire sequence had been. Michael saw Prince in the audience and made a split-second decision. His musical director would recall. He had no idea if Prince would accept the invitation or how it would unfold if he did. It was the bravest thing I ever saw him do on stage, and I worked with him for 15 years. Prince's guitar technician, who had scrambled to prepare an instrument that hadn't been expected to be used, offered similar perspective. Prince was genuinely surprised. This wasn't some publicity stunt they cooked up beforehand. You could see it in his face backstage. He was processing it in real time, deciding whether to go out there, what it would mean. This spontaneity, this human responsiveness to the moment rather than adherence to plan, was precisely what had made the collaboration so powerful for those who witnessed it. In an entertainment landscape increasingly defined by careful image management, by risk avoidance, by relationships mediated through publicists and managers, the sight of two icons making a genuine human connection, complete with all the vulnerability and uncertainty such connections entail, resonated far beyond the music itself. It represented possibility, the possibility of reconciliation after misunderstanding, of collaboration after competition, of finding harmony where discord had prevailed. In the years that followed, both Michael and Prince would reference that night as significant, though neither spoke about it extensively. Some moments don't belong to the public, even when they happen in public, Prince told an interviewer who pressed for details. They belong to the people who live them. Michael, when asked if the collaboration might lead to more substantial joint projects, offered his characteristic enigmatic smile. Everything happens when it's supposed to happen, he said. That night was perfect exactly as it was. Not everything needs a sequel. The physical symbols of their reconciliation, the rhinestone glove and purple scarf, took on lives of their own. Michael was occasionally spotted wearing the purple scarf during private recording sessions, not as performance costume, but as personal talisman. Prince was never seen publicly with the glove, leading many to assume it had been a temporary gesture, the item returned after the show. But those close to him knew it occupied a place of honor in his Paisley Park home, displayed not prominently, but privately, a personal reminder rather than public statement. Years later, after both men had left this world, that night at Madison Square Garden would continue to be discussed, analyzed, celebrated. Music historians would place it in context. Fans would share increasingly detailed memories. New generations would discover the footage online and marvel at the chemistry between two icons they knew only through recordings and legend. But perhaps the most telling testament came from a sound engineer who had been working that night, who had witnessed not just the public performance, but the private moments backstage before and after. Interviewed for a documentary decades after the event, he leaned forward in his chair, eyes bright with remembered wonder. People always ask if it was rehearsed, if they planned it, he said. But that misses the whole point. The magic wasn't that it happened. The magic was that they allowed it to happen. Two artists at that level, with that much history, that much baggage between them, the natural instinct would be to maintain distance, to protect your territory, your image. Instead, They chose vulnerability. They chose connection. In this business, that's the rarest thing of all. He paused, emotion briefly overtaking him. I've mixed thousands of shows since then. Never seen anything like it. Never will again. Perhaps that's the most accurate description of what happened that night at Madison Square Garden in September 2001. Not a simple public reconciliation between rivals, not a calculated career move, but a shift, subtle yet seismic, in what seemed possible. A reminder that even in relationships marked by years of misunderstanding and competition, moments of genuine connection can emerge, unexpected and transformative. That music at its best isn't about who's better or who's king, but about harmony, the beautiful possibility that emerges when different notes find their perfect, complementary resonance. If this video has touched you, if it has reminded you of music's power to bridge divides and create unexpected moments of beauty, please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who understands that our deepest conflicts sometimes contain the seeds of our most meaningful connections, that what appears as rivalry can transform into respect when we have the courage to see each other's humanity. And remember that in a world that often profits from division and conflict, acts of genuine reconciliation become their own kind of revolution, their own form of art more powerful than any single performance could ever be. In a small exhibition at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, created years after both men had passed, a display case contains two items side by side, a single rhinestone glove and a purple silk scarf. The official placard offers dates, facts, context, but it's the unofficial stories that visitors share with each other as they stand before the display that capture the true significance. My mother was there, a young woman tells her friend. She said when they exchanged those items, the whole place went silent. Like everyone knew they were seeing something that would never happen again. Next to her, an older man nods. I watched it on TV, he says. Couldn't see their faces clearly, just figures on the stage. But I felt it. Everyone did. Something shifting in the universe. And perhaps that's the most accurate description of all. A moment when something shifted, when something healed, when something new became possible through the simple, profound courage of two artists choosing connection over division, harmony over discord, the vulnerable truth of human recognition over the safe distance of manufactured rivalry.